Global Indian Network. Print, TV, events, podcasts. Find out more at globalindianseries.com. Hi, my name is Divya and I'm co-founder of the Global Indian Podcast. Before you get to today's show, I've got a quick favour to ask. If you've been enjoying our conversations, I'd love if you could take just 1 minute to leave us a review on the platform that you're listening to us on and share our work to friends and family. It helps us out a lot. Word of mouth is the primary way that we grow. Thanks for your continued support.
Well, as the gods of fate may have it, I find myself currently in Vancouver, finding my way through this incredible city, hoping to meet with Jayant Bhandari, who's an incredible individual who's not only taken up a custodianship of having a look at how countries develop themselves, look at the economic models behind it, but also equally important, he does a seminar here every single year, look at capitalism and morality. But unfortunately, Jayant is currently in Tokyo, whilst I am currently in Vancouver. So with the thankful technologies of Zoom, we are able to connect with each other. So without further ado, Jayant, it's lovely to have you on the show.
Thanks very much for having me here, Rajan.
So Jayant, before we kick off, why not I give you a brief elevator pitch so you can introduce yourself to the audience? Because not only are you an investor, an entrepreneur, you also do the junior mining side of things. So you look at the commodity markets. So there's quite a lot to you in terms of the work that you do.
Okay, so Rajan, I started Indian subsidiary of a British company in India. And then I also did the same for a Swiss company. And I immigrated to Canada in 2003. For the last 20 years, I have got involved into the investment aspect of life. And I focus primarily on investing in junior mining companies and also looking at stock markets in China and Hong Kong. I also do a fair bit of writing and speaking on economic and cultural issues.
Brilliant. So the big issue that comes out from a lot of your work is the way in which countries look at themselves, how identity is formed and the economic impact that has. When you look at the globe right now, I know that you're currently in Japan and it's a purpose-driven society, and you look at countries such as Canada or India or the UK, what becomes apparent for you? How do you view these nations, and how does the idea of perception of identity impact the economic outputs of many of the countries out there?
Well, it's very important to understand the underpinning cultures of these societies. Without understanding that, I get nowhere. Whenever I go, whenever I go traveling to look at any investment possibility, I want to understand the local culture. I want to live among local people for a few days. I want to understand the local economics. I want to understand the level of productivity of people in those societies. And that underpins not only my investments, but also underpins my understanding of those societies and where those societies are headed. It's very important for me to invest in places where people are honest, where people have integrity, where people are self-reflecting, where people want to improve the quality of their work as time progresses, and where people have the concept of honor within them. So these are the issues that we constantly come across, and this is extremely important these are the things extremely important to understand the future of these societies.
Interesting. So then, when you look at those parameters in some of the countries that you invest in, I know it's mainly in the commodity space, what becomes apparent? How do you know if a country is purpose-driven? What does integrity look like within a nation?
Well, look at the country Japan, where I am these days. If you travel in public transportation here, people don't talk with each other. People don't use their cell phones inside the trains because they are so conscientious that they don't want to trouble anyone else sitting around them. When they get off their seats in the trains, they set everything right before they get off the train. So that's the quality of conscientiousness I see in this society, and I can see the quality of their work. Nothing gets late. Nothing gets late. Everything is done perfectly, and I can see a future in a society like this. I know it's sustainable. It's the kind of people I can trust. A lot of understandings, a lot of contracts that uh, I tend to do with people in some of the societies are based on gentlemanly agreement. It's a word of mouth, and you get paid on time. You get paid what you agreed on, and you do the same thing with those people. So these societies ensure that there is not much time wasted on lack of trust. You try to deliver more than you promise. And this is what I have consistently seen in societies that have succeeded in the last century.
What's happened to those societies or countries that have failed?
They actually lack all those qualities that I just talked about. See, I'm in China next week, and I'll be there for quite a while. I was in Changsha just a couple of months before COVID hit. And I got to a mall which was closed, which was under construction. The sidewalk was completely in disarray. And I went to my hotel, and I came out a bit later in the morning. And when I came out, the sidewalk had been put together, the mall was open, the celebration was going on. And this is the kind of things I see in some of the countries, and I say, no one can beat these people. They are winners. They will grow, and they will continue to grow because they get things done in a night that I would have expected to get done in months in most places. And also, you see the quality of services. I have been going to China for the last 15 or 17 years, and I have seen a continual improvement in those people. What are they doing? They're trying Japanese ways. Now, Chinese dislike Japan, but they still copy Japanese way of working. This is what South Koreans did. This is what. So what you see is that successful people, successful societies copy good aspects of other successful countries and societies. Japan started with copying what was happening in Germany. Japan started this in 1850s. And this is when your eyes are on quality. That is when your eyes on doing what is right rather than what is expedient. And this is what I think consistently underpins the cultures, the societies of that are successful.
Now, you do a discussion called capitalism and morality. When we look across the globe right now, we can see that there is a big move towards ideas of socialism or the concepts of a socialist society. But we also hear of issues such as Venezuela. We've seen what's happening in Portugal. It's done incredibly well. But I don't think we can just put that on the current government's administration either. In the West, we've seen a change in the way that the governments have been operating. Run our audience through a bit more about how you view capitalism and morality. What is that golden thread that connects the two things together?
So capitalism is a concept that came into existence in the United Kingdom, and this was a system that came into existence, which was a combination of not just the free market, but it was a combination of moral values and the respect for contracts that the society had developed over a period of time. Now, there's nothing like a free market by itself. You have to have the concept of contracts and the concept of moral values within that society to make all the concept of capitalism work. Capitalism is a combination of these things, and now the word came into existence much later, but this is what underpinned industrialization and further success of the United Kingdom, which thereafter spread to the rest of Europe and to some countries in East Asia.
And so then, in your models that you work on this idea of trust and making sure that we abide by the contracts, even Japan, looking at this whole Kaizen theory, constant continuous improvement. When you look at Europe, do you still feel that the West is still leading the way, although it markets itself as doing the same thing? But the economy of the UK, for example, is very different from that of Japan, or is very different from that of China.
Well, European countries have certainly lost their ways. They are far from where they should have been. They have drifted away from their philosophical, moral, Western value systems over the last century or so. But still, having said that, Western society is an extremely good society. Things work in those societies. There's still a huge concept of honor and trust and respect for contracts and the respect for individual. Respect for the individual is also a very important building block for capitalism. So Europe has done a lot of very good things. Europe was spearheaded building civilization among humans. That said, Europe is losing its way, but it is still a great place to be.
In what way do you see it's losing its way, and what impact does it have on investor confidence?
Well, there's too much of socialism in Europe. As time has gone by, there's far too much of socialism, which means that a lot of money gets given away to people who don't want to work, people who want free money. The concept of honor gets drained away when people can expect free money from other people as a right. As time has passed by, a lot of people who have not worked in several generations now. People get welfare payments very easily in European countries. University education is relatively free in Europe, which means that you can stay a juvenile for much longer than you should be. So, this concept of socialism, compassion gone wild is what I would say is a problem in Europe, which is destroying the underpinnings of European societies. But also, Europe has brought in a huge amount of immigrants, people who don't fit in, people from cultures and societies who don't want to understand European values, who want to exploit it for monetary benefits. So, a homogeneous society is a good society. It works well. Europe has completely lost its way there.
We did a podcast recording with President Museveni a while ago in Uganda, and one thing that he said in there is when he had a look at Uganda was that the strength was in multiculturalism based upon the concept of joint identity. In this case, it was because of the languages that people had in their philosophical belief. Now, you're talking about the commodity markets. Essentially, the biggest movements right now are happening in emerging markets because people are looking at mining, example. Would you say that there's markets within the African continent then that you're looking at saying, well, these work? And do they also marry up with your identity markers to say, well, actually, they are also practicing Kaizen? Because a lot of criticism in these places is that they do not honor contracts, that they do not honor business deals, that things are not as transparent as they should be, but yet they're offering growth in the other.
Africa, there's a lot of romantic views that exist in the market about Africa, particularly sub-Saharan Africa. I did hear a couple of years back people talking about Rwanda becoming the fastest growing economy in the world. And those kind of things. But the problem is that, and I have traveled a fair bit in sub-Saharan Africa, and I tell you, there's nothing that attracts me in sub-Saharan Africa. Everything in sub-Saharan Africa is falling apart, including Uganda. There are tribal conflicts. There's a lack of productivity. There's a lack of understanding on how to run their societies. There's a lack of economic growth. There is a huge amount of money that has historically come to sub-Saharan Africa from Western countries, which has mostly ended up in the bank accounts of the politicians of those countries. If you want to, for example, start a shop in Uganda, you don't start a shop in Uganda in your own village. You have to cross over to DRC or go to another village far away from where you are. Otherwise, your family members or your friends will just take away free stuff from your shop and not pay you. So, the culturally sub-Saharan African countries are not structured for economic growth. I don't see a future in sub-Saharan Africa. We invest in sub-Saharan Africa because we are there to make money. If we see an opportunity, we invest in those opportunities. But as societies, I don't think African countries are going anywhere.
What do you think is the biggest misconception that people have of the investment market, and more important, the way in which you look at societies?
Well, investors understand what is happening. A lot of people understand, but they can't talk about it because there's something called political correctness. And if you say these kind of things that about Africa, then you get cancelled from your job. You get your friends start to shun you because you come to be seen as a racist. But facts are facts. The problem again of sub-Saharan Africa is that there is simply nothing works in sub-Saharan African countries. You build high-tech factories, and the same people who run those high-tech factories realize that they are better off importing what they were trying to produce than producing those things in Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa. So, I see wherever I look at Africa, I see a continual degeneration, particularly in South Africa, which is a fast-paced degeneration is happening there. So that is the situation. So again, when you use the word emerging markets, I don't buy that word because these are not emerging markets. They are degenerating markets. They are de-emerging markets. They are societies that are on a suicidal path, and they have a very chaotic future.
Which markets do you feel, because again, in the same notion, people speak about India as this fast-growing marketplace that the world is going to be meeting. But if you use the same ideas of how you judge a nation, would you say India is in this fast track, or is there something else behind it? Or are we just romanticizing?
People are certainly romanticizing India. If you look at GDP per capita of India, or you look at stunted children in India, you look at health metrics of India, in virtually every aspect, India is no better than sub-Saharan Africa. It is mostly worse than sub-Saharan Africa. What has actually happened over the last 20, 30 years is that Indian lobbies in the UK and in the US have recreated this romanticized view of India. But India is an extraordinarily backward, wretched, tyrannical country. And again, whatever I said about sub-Saharan Africa is as true with India as it is with sub-Saharan Africa. And I might say that India might be on a fast track to destroying itself compared to sub-Saharan Africa.
Now, for many people hearing that, including myself, it seems contrary to everything else that's out there. You've seen this influx of investments going in, but yes, on the other side, we've seen capital flows worth over 70 billion leaving every single year. So there is obviously truth to the matter that money is leaving India at a rapid pace as well, and a lot of high net individuals are leaving. Why do you feel that this country, called India, which is seen as this economic powerhouse, is in a fast track of decay? What are the indicators that you're seeing that the rest of the world has almost looked at with rose-tinted glasses?
Right. So apart from, I told you about what I do in life, but I also advise companies on investing in third world countries. I have been involved in advising multi-billion-dollar companies on investing in India. I guide them, I advise them on what's happening and help them process what they see while they are trying to navigate through the bureaucracy and corruption and all the issues to do with India. I have spent a lot of time in India over the last few years for the consulting work that I was doing for a couple of companies. What I have seen is that corruption within the government has increased exponentially over the last decades. The quality of people in the government has deteriorated rapidly, and I have to say that quite often when I have met senior officers in the government of the country, I end up thinking if those people have any brains, because they simply don't understand anything. There is something called affirmative, reservation, which is affirmative policy action. Affirmative action policies, which enable jobs for lower caste people, but those people could be completely uneducated and they go into positions of power. Government offices are now packed with those people who have no clue what they are up to. They don't understand their jobs, and all they care about is in collecting bribes. Look at people. There is an increasing communal tension in the country. There's an increasing Hindu-Muslim problem in the country. So infrastructure is in a horrible shape. Just about everything that I see in that country is worsening with time. I find India very expensive as well. Overall, I just don't see a value in general in investing in that country. The one thing that I might say why India is currently being romanticized is that the Western governments want to have a better relationship with India, probably because they want to use India as a front for any war with China. And they probably understand it very well that Indian armed forces are ineffectual. They are probably incompetent, and the Western countries understand that. But they still very likely want to use the Indian bases in case there's a war with China on Taiwan or something else. So, the Western governments might be trying to please Modi and the Indian government for the time being, but just as a pawn rather than because they really think India is a good country. But then because they are creating this propaganda, it is permeating into the rest of the Western society. And I, for example, last month was asked to work for one of the teachers' pension fund in the US, and they want me to help them decide on a portfolio in India. And I said I couldn't do it because I don't invest in India myself. So why should I advise you on investing in India?
Wow. Okay, so which countries, in your opinion, you mentioned obviously Japan, you mentioned China, but which countries, in your opinion, are doing things correctly?
The whole of East Asia is doing extremely well. You look at Japan is doing very well. China is doing extremely well. And I think China is pretty much the future of humanity. China consumes virtually 50% of everything that we produce. The computer that you are speaking into, your microphone, many things in your background are made in China. China is the manufacturing powerhouse of the world today. So China is doing extremely well. South Korea is doing very well. Taiwan is doing very well. Hong Kong is a great place even today. Singapore is a wonderful country, probably the best run country on the planet. So you look at East Asia, they are doing extremely well because they have not given themselves away to socialism. If you don't work in these countries, there's a high likelihood you will go hungry. If you're not responsible, there's no concept of asking for free stuff from the governments in any of these countries. There's no whining minority in these countries. You can't afford to whine in these countries. You can't afford to ask for anything like reparations for whatever happened to your ancestors 10 generations away in the past.
Now, that is based upon a principle that we place a great reliance on the integrity of leadership. So, with the right leadership within a nation comes the right institutional reforms. It also ensures that we have the most competent individuals in the relevant places, something that you spoke about before. When we have a look at this whole socialism side, surely part of that is saying that with the right economic structures, there is a support mechanism there that can actually help those who are legitimately unable to work, either if it is through accidents that are taking place or if it is through disabilities. So, on that same token, then, do you believe that all socialism is bad then?
Oh, well, so you do get money from governments here, but you get minimal amount of money. You don't get money for you don't get money to travel abroad, or you don't get money to drink your weekends away. You get just survival money so that you are motivated enough to look for a job. So they might give you a few $100s to survive in a very basic way, but they don't splurge money on you.
They're not, so you're saying that they don't fund a lifestyle that is in want for a better word from what you're describing as inept.
Yeah, but also there's an honor culture. There's a concept of honor in these societies. So the beggars in Tokyo hide themselves away. They are too shy to be right in front of you asking for money. So there's a concept of honor that is still in East Asia. And remember, Rajan, a lot of these values were imported from West Europe. So these values existed in West Europe, but in West Europe, for whatever reasons, we have slowly diluted away those values.
Yeah, I'm going to draw your attention to something a bit deeper there. What does it mean to be a human being for you? Because you look at the mechanisms, you look at economies, you've obviously got this very strong idea of honor, of purpose. What does it all mean to you?
Well, this is a very deep question, and I don't think anyone has clear answers to these questions. I think what I want to do is to understand life and improve the world, and that is the contribution that good people like to make to their environment. But you can only have that if you have the right policies. Because if you don't have right policies, what you have is what you see currently. If you walk out in Vancouver, you will see massive amount of homelessness and drug addiction. And Canada is a heaven. It's a socialist heaven. But this is what socialism leads to, because you take away aspirations from people. If you give away too much of free money to people, they don't really aspire for anything in life. There's nothing left for them. You have to have the honor culture to make you wake up in the morning and go for work. So that is so socialism results into decay of societies.
So again, coming back to it, I know it's a deep question, and very tactfully, you maneuvered through there, but what does it mean to be a human for you then? Is it this idea of purpose? Is it an idea of personal honor whilst you're here?
I guess so, yeah. I think that we all have, we are driven by a purpose. And a lot of people, if you don't let them find a purpose, tend to become hedonistic. And a lot of people, I can afford to be hedonistic for the rest of my life, but I run around, do my work, talk about things that I see rather than sit on a beach and enjoy my life. Because there's nothing like enjoying your life. You get bored of drinking the same cocktail 5 times a day. So, your life has to be driven by a purpose.
That's really interesting. Yeah, if people want to find out more about the work that you do these incredible seminars every single year in Vancouver, where you have remarkable speakers lined up for this. But obviously, you do the consulting side, you're looking at junior mining industries as well, the commodity markets, and you have very firm and passionate beliefs. about many certain key areas. Where can they go? How can they get in touch?
I have a website, jayantbhandari.com, and all my written work ends up on that website.
Brilliant. Jay, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Is there any final thoughts that you want to leave the audience? One area that I've realized we haven't covered is the Caribbean, and I think it'd be very unfair of me to mention about Africa, Asia. We haven't spoken about Australasia, but we did speak about Europe. But what is your verdict on the Caribbean? You got countries such as Guyana, Trinidad, and then obviously the St. Lucia's and
Well, I mean, Guyana found a lot of oil and gas, and it should be an extremely rich country, but it is an extraordinarily corrupt place. I have never been to Guyana, but I have friends in Guyana who tell me it's an extraordinarily corrupt place, and it's run on tribal basis. There's an Indian party and there's a African party. And it's a country run on tribal basis, and that's how people vote in those countries, and that's how people vote in India. That's how people vote in everywhere in Africa, and that's the problem with these people, because they vote on the basis of either their tribal connections or the free stuff they get. The people in unenlightened countries don't have a vision for the future. They are after they are after resources in an expedient way rather than doing the right thing. And that is the problem with a lot of these countries. Again, I think every Latin American country that I look at is going worse with time.
Do you think capitalism is the way forward then for our species? Is it the way forward for economic growth or purposeful economic management?
Well, that is the only way you can accumulate intellectual and financial capital. There has to be a way to accumulate resources. If you don't accumulate resources and invest, then those societies can't grow. They deplete their resources if they don't accumulate resources. Socialist societies have a tendency to deplete resources because they have a calculation problem. They can't calculate what effect what they're investing or spending on will have in the future. So they have a calculation problem. But the third world countries of sub-Saharan Africa or the Indian subcontinent have another layer of problem, which is that they don't just have a calculation problem, they have this horrendous problem of venality and corruption, where every single officer is only interested in the bribes he can collect. So Rajan, meeting these people, the only conversation, everything is calculated on the basis of the bribes, and then usually if you talk with sane Indians, they will tell you that let's just make corruption legal, because corruption is not the biggest problem in these countries. The biggest problem these days is the sheer incompetency of these people. And that is what I see in a lot of third world countries, particularly in Africa and in the Indian subcontinent.
Powerful words. Jay, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you very much, Rajan, for the opportunity.
Global Indian Network. Print, TV, events, podcasts. Find out more at globalindianseries.com.